Hi, Myrna. Thank you so much for being a part of the Breakfast with Boyden series.
I'm excited.
Excellent. So I would love, Myrna, to have you introduce yourself and maybe talk for a couple of minutes, give everyone your background. Our topic today is going to be retaining staff, both personally and professionally. And I would love to hear a little bit more about your background.
Of course, yeah. I've been in the nonprofit world for about 20 years now. Wasn't always a nonprofit. My first career was actually in TV. I spent 4 years in news and 2 years in sports producing. And that was a really interesting first step and first career to have. I'm actually really grateful. Having started there, there were a lot of just skills that I learned, whether it was the fast pace and the critical thinking and certainly a thick skin and just the type of work that it was. But one of the things I think that was interesting for me is it really is what drove me to nonprofit. It was especially the news section where I was covering a lot of things. And in all of that journey, I felt myself wanting rewarding work where every single day I was helping. And that led me to nonprofit. And so I answered an ad in a paper, which sounds incredibly foreign right now, and began my nonprofit career with the MS Society in Florida. And I was, first 4 years, everything frontline. It was a very entry-level position where I just learned as much as I could. And then the national office approached me about a national position, and I've been on a national level ever since. So I spent 14 years with the National MS Society and
Wow.
7 years with JDRF, and now hopefully about to embark on a new adventure with another wonderful organization.
So exciting. So
Very.
you're atypical, staying places 14 years, 10 years. What makes you stay? How do you keep your job fresh?
It's interesting. I've been giving that a lot of thought in the sense of just thinking I've stayed with these organizations. There is a level though, my positions have evolved around that, and they were evolving every 4 years when I look back at just even the time at MS and even at JDRF. But the thing that really sticks out to me is the support and the leadership that I received. I was fortunate enough to work for leaders that made investments in me, in my training, in my professional growth, that gave me time, gave me safe places to actually make mistakes and learn. And that, I think, that is the one common piece that I would say to you that I had in every single one of my roles. And not many people can say that, especially consecutively, how many different leaders I worked for. I feel very blessed in that way. But that was the one thing, was I felt not only was I aligned to my strengths, I was valued for the work that I did. I was recognized for that work and empowered to lead, to do good work, to fail and learn from that. And I think all of those things are really what kept me, along with the mission, of course, kept me going and kept me wanting to stay. At no point in any one of my journeys with these organizations was I unhappy, or there wasn't a day that I didn't look forward to going into the office.
Gosh, that's so great.
Right. I say that, and that was completely opposite of my experience in TV, where I just did not have the same feeling. I feel very, very blessed. And that's been for 20 years I've had that. So
I guess that's how you made the right choice.
And completely. For sure.
And what role do you think leadership plays? You mentioned, every 4 years or so being promoted, but really having some great leadership. So looking back through your career, what impact do you think leadership has?
It was everything. If I were to think back when I first started nonprofit, you go into an entry-level position and you do everything. But in that journey where you're learning the nonprofit sector, at least for me, I had a leader who invested in me, would send me to training, would coach me, would push me out of my comfort zone. And I was in that role for 4 years under that leader, who's still there and is now a very high level leader for the organization. But after 4 years, someone from the national office reached out to me, and they asked me to to consider a role that I was like, why are you calling me? And I share that with you because they saw something in me that I didn't at the time. And so it was that type of leadership where they see a strength and they're like, we can train you. We know you have the competencies and the skills that are needed to be successful in this role, and we'll train you along the way. And that gave me confidence to make that leap. And so I did.
That's great.
And they did exactly what they said they were going to do. I remember making lots of mistakes. I remember oftentimes sitting with my leader and they're like, okay, let's take a step back. Let's talk me through what you did. And she would coach me, never giving me the answer, always asking the right questions and helping me identify, like, the things that I was missing, where my strengths were. My gut was telling me to do something and I ignored it, right? So I had that throughout my time at MS. I had that in JDRF. JDRF, I would say, even the leader I worked for there, just a strategic thought partner that wouldn't always give you the answers, but gave you this environment to learn from your mistakes, empowered you to just drive forward, and was very, appreciative of everything I did. So when you feel valued that way, and you'll notice I didn't say anything about money, because it was in any of these roles, none of it had to do with, people can be driven by money, but money is not what inspires. Inspiration comes every single day. And I think the one constant for me was I had the good fortune of amazing leaders.
That's so great. And how do you think that's changed you personally as a manager, or how has that molded you as a manager when you look at hiring folks or managing the team?
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I remember there was a time in my early on in my career when I was on a national level, and my mentor led a certain way. She was, if you look at DISC or any of those, she was a highly direct and right to the point individual. And once you got to know her, you appreciated just her style of leadership. You understood her style of leadership. I found myself sometimes wanting to model that, but it felt unnatural to me. And I think over time for me was looking at every one of the leaders, what resonated with me, what didn't when it came to my leadership style. Not that it was wrong, it was just not my leadership style. And I guess as I've grown through my career, I've taken a little bit of each of them, of what I thought was powerful, and I've just created my own way with that. I would say to you, the biggest thing that I focus on is with each individual that I lead or that I work with, whether they're on my team or not, is everyone has something that they're inspired by or a strength of theirs. And as a leader, for me, the biggest thing you can do is figure out the strength and then align that person to that strength and give them clarity of goal, clarity of role, give them that safe environment. And what you'll see is someone really striving to be their very best. And when that happens, I think not only do they stay and are feeling fulfilled in their role, but the organization achieves its goal. And so that's how I try to lead, is just by inspiring and lifting others up. I don't need for myself, I don't need reward. It's really watching others grow that I find the most rewarding.
That's so great. And how do you hire? Tell me, maybe you have some secrets, and maybe there's a secret sauce.
Right.
You'd be willing to share, whether it's looking at resumes or interviewing, any way that you pick the perfect team members.
Well, I think it's interesting because I guess, I don't know if I'm going to describe it this way. I don't know if it's the right way to describe it. So the art and science to it. So I can look on a resume and things will jump out to me, especially in fundraising. And this is the piece: if someone has that 1 to 3 year track record constantly on their resume and they're jumping, that is a flag for me to drill in. And you'll notice I said it's not a flag that I automatically dismiss. There's a story there, and a lot of times there's a consistency on why there's a shift. So for me, it's better understanding that. If I see someone 4 or more years, then that is usually okay. There's longevity there. That means there's likely success. There is likely in the sense of just meeting metrics and so forth, that can come with that longevity. If it's too long, then I always fear about, are they going to be able to shift to a new culture? And what will that time? And I'm willing to put the time in, depending on the skill set of someone or the need that I have. It's just a matter of what is that need, and then ultimately, can I get that time? So those are like the flags I look at on the resume. The other piece for me is I like having multiple conversations with someone, and I like having longer conversations because I think everyone can perform to some degree for a 45 to 1 hour limit. But when you have multiple, and you have longer time periods together, where you start having really fluid conversation outside of the questions that most of us prepare for, that's when you start to see someone's, like, the real color shine through, or the real strengths and nuance difference that each individual has, at least in my experience. So, and the other last piece I would say is I do spend a lot of time with references and really understanding the references and drilling down. I think sometimes we do that very quickly as a formality, and I think it can be an enormous tool when done correctly.
Do you have, speaking of references, do you have a favorite question you always ask a reference?
I have a couple. So one would be, what question have I not asked that you wish I would about this candidate?
That is always my favorite.
I love that question, right? Because it's just like, it allows them to go anywhere with that.
Right.
Trying to think of, that's the one that comes to mind right now.
That's a great question. It's something that we always use, because at the end of the interview, I have a series of questions, and then at the end of the interview or the end of the reference, I always want to know, what didn't I ask? What are you dying to tell me? What should I watch out for? Do you have any other questions that you might ask of a reference?
Yeah, one just came to mind, which is, if you were to describe, how would someone describe this candidate when they're not in the room? And I share that with you because when it comes to my staff, if someone gives me feedback and it's a positive feedback, I literally will pick up the phone in that very moment, call the staff, and share the feedback with them, saying, hey, this person just said this about you. And most times they're, oh, really? That's so nice. I said, the reason why I'm calling is that tells you something. When the way in which they talk about you when you're not in the room tells you something. And I just wanted you to hear that. And so those are the type of things, like in
that's
leadership,
so
that we actually need to pause, and because that's what people value. Then they know that fills their cup. They know they're doing good work, and they just want to lean in even more.
Absolutely. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that every 4 years or so you were promoted, and sometimes people tend to stay 2 years or 3 years. They don't quite make it to that 4-year mark. And what advice would you give to someone if they're wavering between, I've been here for 3 years, 4 years, my job isn't as fresh as it used to be? What advice might you give for them to either contemplate leaving or talking to someone about it?
Well, maybe I'll share how I've approached it, and maybe they can tease out whatever is useful. I know for myself, I always have to be pushed. Like, I want to be pushed out of my comfort zone, because I've always found I grow the most when I'm pushed that way. That means I actually have to have this agreement with my leader, right? And having the conversation, like, let's talk about my goals and what is expected of me. And for me to share here, if this is where I want to go in my career, can we have a dialogue of the places, the competencies I need to build? And then can you help me in my day-to-day build them?
Right.
Because I think it's when you have that back and forth where you're constantly being challenged, it's much easier to be inspired every single day for me. I think it's when you're not pushed and you're not learning and you don't have that you start to feel like the complacency, and you start to feel like not fulfilled in your job. But then, everyone's different. There are some individuals that love the ramp up of a new job and love the excitement of starting something new, building something new, maybe fixing some of the challenges that an organization might have and getting it on solid ground. And when it's ready to be taken kind of forward in a stable way, that isn't what fills their cup. It's the ramping and the building that fills their cup. And so that actually might feed into the 1 to 3 years. So I think that's where you have to drill in and understand what fills everyone's cup, what inspires them. And then that way you have a better sense of how to align to their competencies.
Excellent. And I love your reference to the cup since we are doing breakfast with Boyden.
Yes, indeed, right?
And lastly, I would love to learn a little bit about what was your favorite or your most inspiring cup of coffee you've had with someone or breakfast with anyone?
Oh, inspiring with someone. I had in my mind, I was thinking the most enjoyable cup of coffee was in Acadia. My family was on vacation and we were staying on a lake house, and it was my kids and my husband would always sleep in, and I would always wake up purposefully and like at 7 a.m. and go to the dock, and it was serene and it was quiet. It was peaceful. That was like my favorite. But with an individual, that's a tough one. Wow. With an individual, I'm going to keep it professional. And it's so interesting because I haven't talked to her in years, but the past CEO for the National MS Society, I remember one meeting we had, and she was, I was early on in my career still, and here I am sitting. It was just the two of us. No one else had come in yet, and it was just sitting with the CEO, and I felt so fortunate, and it was probably one of the most humble type of conversations I have ever experienced. And she just really listened and asked me thoughtful questions, and I asked her thoughtful questions, and we had just an amazing exchange over coffee, over breakfast. And it was, I think those are the type of moments where I feel like here I am just a staff member, and I have the full attention of a president and CEO who is like in the conversation totally
listening.
And I was forever grateful for that.
Oh, that's so great. Well, thank you so much for being a part of Breakfast with Boyden. We really appreciate it. And
thank you. This was so much fun.
Yes, and we can't wait to hear about what your next endeavor will be.
Well, I look forward to that as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.